The Biloxi people, known autonomously as the Tanêks or Tanêks-a, interpreted as First People, represent a unique and ethnologically significant cultural enclave within the Native American history of the Southeastern United States. Distinct from the dominant Muskogean-speaking majorities of the region, such as the Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Creek, the Biloxi possessed a language belonging to the Siouan family, indicating a deep ancestral migration from the Ohio River Valley. This report provides a comprehensive analysis of the Biloxi tribe, tracing their trajectory from pre-contact origins through the devastation of European colonization, their subsequent diaspora into Louisiana and Texas, and their modern revitalization as part of the federally recognized Tunica-Biloxi Tribe of Louisiana. This document is designed to serve as a foundational Bible for the production of a high-fidelity documentary film. It addresses the specific requirements of the user's request for a documentary-style narrative while adhering to the rigorous standards of an expert-level research report. The text integrates exhaustive historical data, linguistic analysis, and ethnographic details to support scriptwriters, directors, and researchers in creating an accurate and nuanced portrayal of the Biloxi people. The analysis relies on historical records from French explorers, Iberville, Bienville, and ethnographies by James Owen Dorsey and John Swanton, and contemporary data from the Tunica-Biloxi Tribe of Louisiana. It explicitly excludes extraneous data regarding the Lummi Nation of the Pacific Northwest, which appeared in the research corpus but is irrelevant to the Biloxi subject matter. The presence of a Siouan-speaking people on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi in the late 17th century presents a compelling historical anomaly. The vast majority of tribes in the southeastern culture area spoke languages belonging to the Muskogean family. The Biloxi, along with the Ofo and Tutelo, form the Ohio Valley Siouan or Southeastern Siouan branch of the language family. Linguistic phylogenetics suggests that the ancestors of the Biloxi separated from the core Siouan population in the north and migrated southward, likely following the Ohio and Mississippi river systems. This migration placed them in a cultural island, surrounded by neighbors with whom they shared material traits but no linguistic intelligibility. This isolation likely fostered a strong sense of distinct identity encapsulated in their name Tanêks, the First People, an assertion of primacy in a crowded geopolitical landscape. The exonym Biloxi is a corruption of the tribal name, filtered through French phonetic interpretation. Early European chroniclers recorded numerous variations, reflecting the difficulty they had with the native phonology. The Biloxi language, Tanêks-a, offers profound insights into the tribe's worldview. Although the language went dormant in the 1930s with the death of Emma Jackson, extensive documentation by James Owen Dorsey allows for a detailed reconstruction. The language is characterized by a system of oral and nasal vowels, a feature shared with many southeastern languages but distinct in its Siouan application. It is an agglutinative language, where complex meanings are built by adding prefixes and suffixes to root words. Verbs are highly inflected. For example, the root de, to go, can be modified to donde, potential mode, will go, or te, optative mode, wish to go. The language reflects the matrilineal social structure. Specific terms exist for sister's son versus brother's son, indicating the different social roles played by maternal uncles versus biological fathers. Currently, the Tunica-Biloxi tribe is engaged in active revitalization. While Tunica has more surviving documentation and learners, Biloxi is also being reclaimed through the analysis of Dorsey's texts and the remaining recordings of Emma Jackson. The written history of the Biloxi begins in late February 1699 with the arrival of Pierre Le Moyne d'Iberville, the Canadian-born founder of French Louisiana. Iberville's expedition, seeking the mouth of the Mississippi River, anchored off Ship Island and explored the mainland coast. Iberville's journals describe encountering a village on the Pascagoula River. The interactions were initially cautious. The Biloxi were one of the few groups in the area who did not speak the Mobilian jargon, a trade language based on Choctaw used as a lingua franca in the Southeast, further evidence of their linguistic distinctiveness. Crucially, Iberville noted that the village appeared largely deserted or depopulated, with ruins of mud cabins suggesting a much larger recent population. He was informed that the tribe had been decimated by a disease epidemic, likely smallpox, approximately 2 years prior to his arrival. This timeline suggests that European pathogens carried by trade networks from Spanish Florida or English Carolina had reached the Biloxi before the French explorers themselves. This virgin soil epidemic likely caused a population collapse of 50% to 90%, fundamentally altering the tribe's social structure just as they were entering the colonial record. The French established Fort Maurepas near the Biloxi settlements at present-day Ocean Springs, Mississippi. This proximity fostered a complex relationship. The Biloxi supplied the garrison with food, venison, maize, and fish, and intelligence on the geography of the interior. In return, they sought protection. The geopolitical landscape of the early 17th century was treacherous. The English in the Carolinas were arming the Chickasaw and other northern tribes to conduct slave raids against the coastal peoples. The Biloxi, with their reduced numbers, estimated at roughly 500 warriors and families in 1700, were vulnerable targets. French observers, particularly Dumont de Montagny and André Pennicot, provided vivid descriptions of Biloxi life during this period. They lived in longhouses constructed of wattle and daub, mud plastered over a wooden lattice, with bark roofs. These were distinct from the hide tents of the Plains Sioux, adapted instead for the humid, storm-prone Gulf Coast. Their villages were surrounded by palisades, tall wooden walls, reinforced with square watchtowers. This defensive architecture underscores the constant threat of warfare and slave raiding that defined their daily existence. They utilized a mix of traditional and European technologies. While they adopted French muskets and metal kettles, as evidenced by the Tunica treasure, they maintained traditional pottery traditions, creating vessels tempered with mussel shells. Biloxi society was hierarchical, a legacy of the Mississippian chiefdoms that once dominated the Southeast. The supreme authority was vested in the Yaxitanya, the Great Sacred One.
The Yaxitanya was not merely a secular ruler, but a divine figure. The linguistic connection between the word for chief, Ayaksi, and shaman or medicine man, Yaxi, indicates that political authority was derived from spiritual power. The chief was responsible for the spiritual health of the community, the success of the harvest, and the mediation between the human and spirit worlds. Below the Great Sacred One was a class of nobles or deputies known as Ixi. These individuals managed the day-to-day affairs of the tribe, enforced the chief's decrees, and organized communal labor, such as mound maintenance or harvest collection. Kinship was the glue of Biloxi society. The tribe followed a strict matrilineal system where descent, clan membership, and inheritance passed through the female line. A man's property and status were often passed to his sister's children rather than his own, as his own children belonged to his wife's clan. These clans regulated marriage, one could not marry within one's own clan, and ceremonial duties. The persistence of these clan identities into the late 19th century, long after the tribe's fragmentation, speaks to the resilience of this social structure. One of the most defining and macabre features of Biloxi culture for European observers was their treatment of deceased nobility. Upon the death of a Yaxitanya or other high-ranking nobles, the body was not buried. It was placed on a platform and subjected to heat and smoke from a fire until it was fully dried and preserved. These preserved mummies were placed upright on red poles inside a sacred temple. This structure served as a mausoleum and a center of worship. Visitors and relatives would bring daily offerings of food to the drying bodies, maintaining a reciprocal relationship with the ancestors. This practice mirrors the mortuary customs of the Natchez and suggests a shared Mississippian cultural substrate. Biloxi economy was a sophisticated blend of agriculture and foraging, adapted to the rich biodiversity of the Gulf Coast. Women were the primary farmers, cultivating maize, beans, squash, and sunflowers. The surpluses were stored in communal granaries, the distribution of which was controlled by the Yaksatanya, reinforcing the social hierarchy. Men hunted white-tailed deer, black bear, and historically wood bison, which were present in the region during the 17th and 18th centuries. The bear was particularly valued not just for meat, but for its fat, which was processed into oil for cooking and cosmetic use. The Pascagoula River and coastal estuaries provided an endless supply of fish and shellfish. The Biloxi utilized weirs, nets, and spears, and likely practiced fire fishing at night. Biloxi women were skilled potters, creating vessels that were both functional and ceremonial. They also wove intricate baskets from river cane, arundanaria, often using double weave techniques that made the baskets watertight. Both sexes practiced tattooing. Designs were often geometric or totemic, representing clan animals, and were applied to the face and body. Distinctive ornaments included nose rings and earrings made of bone or shell. A unique identifier was the use of necklaces made from the bills of long-legged redbirds, likely the roseate spoonbill or the flamingo, which held spiritual significance. Feather headdresses were worn by men of rank, further distinguishing the Ixi and Yaksatanya from commoners. The Treaty of Paris in 1763, which ended French and Indian War, ceded French territory east of the Mississippi to Great Britain. For the Biloxi, French allies for over 60 years, this was a disaster. They feared retribution from English-allied tribes like the Chickasaw and Creek. In a coordinated mass migration, the Biloxi, along with the Pascagoula and other small coastal tribes, crossed the Mississippi River into Spanish-controlled Louisiana. They settled initially near the mouth of the Red River, later moving to Avoyelles Parish. In Louisiana, the Biloxi found themselves living alongside the Tunica, Afo, and Avoyelles, other refugee groups. While they maintained their distinct identities for some time, the demographic pressures forced them closer together. Intermarriage became common, and the political boundaries between the groups began to blur. While the main body of the tribe remained in Louisiana, a significant group of Biloxi pushed westward into Spanish Texas. This migration represents a bold attempt to maintain autonomy on the frontier. Mexican census records document 20 Biloxi families living on the east bank of the Neches River in present-day Angelina County. They were noted to be agriculturalists who also hunted, living in decent relations with the local Caddo and incoming Anglo-American settlers. The Texas Biloxi allied themselves with the Texas Cherokee led by Chief Bull, Duwali. They formed a pan-Indian community in East Texas that sought to secure a permanent land title from the Mexican and later Texan governments. The Texas Biloxi's hopes were dashed by the rise of the Republic of Texas. While President Sam Houston had sought peace and treaties with the East Texas tribes, his successor, Mirabeau Lamar, pursued a policy of ethnic cleansing. In July 1839, Lamar ordered the expulsion of the Cherokee and their allies. The Biloxi fought alongside the Cherokee at the Battle of the Neches. Following the defeat and death of Chief Bull, the Biloxi were violently harried out of Texas. The survivors fled in 3 directions. Some returned to the safety of the Tunica-Biloxi community in Louisiana. Some moved north into Choctaw territory in Oklahoma, and others fled south into Mexico, eventually settling near Nacimiento, Coahuila, with the Seminoles and Kickapoo. The story recounts the tragic love between Anola, a Biloxi princess, and Altama, the chief of the neighboring Pascagoula tribe. The Biloxi Yaksatanya, furious at this betrothal to a rival tribe, launched a war of extermination against the Pascagoula. The Pascagoula,
outmatched and facing enslavement, chose mass suicide. They joined hands and marched into the river, chanting their death song until the waters consumed them. It is said that the low humming sound heard on the river today is the echo of this song. While romanticized by 19th century poets, the core of the story reflects the brutal reality of the slave raids and intertribal warfare of the contact period. For the Biloxi, the river represents both a home and a graveyard, a boundary between the world of the living and the water spirits. In this post-contact tale, the rabbit outwits a French colonist, symbolizing the indigenous struggle to survive against superior European technology and numbers through wit and guile. Rabbit, angry that the sun rises too quickly and scorches his fur, sets a trap to catch the sun. This myth explains the rabbit's scorched shoulders and the nature of the day-night cycle, positioning the rabbit as a culture hero that shapes the environment for humans. Another unique figure in Biloxi mythology is the ancient of tiny frogs, Piscana. In these stories, the small, seemingly insignificant frog possesses great shamanic power, controlling rain and water. This reflects the ecological setting of the Biloxi, a world of swamps and bayous where amphibians are omnipresent. By the 1920s, the Biloxi and Tunica communities in Avoyelles Parish were inextricably linked by blood and geography. However, they lacked formal political unity recognized by the U.S. government. In 1924, a pivotal council was held, where the Biloxi leadership formally recognized Eli Barbary, a leader of mixed lineage, as the chief of the united Tunica-Biloxi tribe. This union was a strategic necessity. The Jim Crow laws of the South disenfranchised Native Americans, often classifying them merely as colored and denying their distinct treaty rights. By uniting, the Tunica and Biloxi strengthened their legal standing and preserved their community integrity against the pressures of assimilation. The road to federal recognition was long and arduous. The tribe faced the termination era of the 1950s, where the U.S. government sought to end its trust relationship with tribes. It was not until the 1970s, under the leadership of Chairman Earl J. Barbary Sr., that the tribe launched a concerted legal and historical campaign to prove their continuous existence. On September 25, 1981, the United States formally acknowledged the Tunica-Biloxi Tribe of Louisiana as a sovereign nation. This victory unlocked access to health care, education, and housing funds, and affirmed the tribe's right to self-government. No history of the modern tribe is complete without the Tunica treasure. In the 1960s, a treasure hunter named Leonard Charrier discovered the Trudeau site, an 18th-century village. He excavated over 2 tons of artifacts, muskets, brass kettles, French pottery, and hundreds of thousands of glass beads. The tribe sued for the return of these ancestors' possessions. In the landmark case Charrier versus Bell, the Louisiana courts ruled that the burial goods were not abandoned, but remained the property of the descendants.